Welcome to Unit 2. We are going to study botany, which is the anatomy and physiology of plants, and then a bigger look at our environment. So continuing with our ecology study, but more of an environmental type study. On this page is a list of all the things that you need to understand by the end of the first half, so the botany unit, and important stuff again is highlighted. So please take notes in your notebook. First of all, there are two types of plants. We are studying vascular plants. They're called vascular mostly because they have vascular tissue. And having vascular tissue means that you have roots and stems and leaves and seeds or pores, all this stuff. And it includes plants that we see very commonly, trees, ferns, and anything that makes a flower. All the other plants on our planet are non-vascular, and we're not going to worry about those because they're super simple. We're going to study the more complex organism. So vascular plants, again, are tall trees, our grasses, and anything flowering. Non-vascular includes basically all the mosses and algae. Liverworts and hornworts are variations of types of mosses that have kind of what would look like leaves, but they don't count as leaves. So we don't care about this page, though. What we do want to know is how do these vascular plants get nutrients up and down their whole entire body? So in order to get water up to these leaves, these plants have to basically defy gravity. And then at the top of the plant where photosynthesis is happening, how do they get that glucose all the way down to the roots? So how do we do all of this? And it is done with the plant vascular system. Humans also have a vascular system. It includes your circulatory system and your lymphatic system. Plants have a vascular system, which is also their transport system. So it's often compared to a human circulatory system. We will look at two different types of vascular setup. A dicot stem looks like this, and this is going to be more of your woody trees. And you can actually see where those tree rings come from, how this is set up. And then monocot stems are smaller plants that don't have rings in them. But not a huge deal here. It still works the same way. There are two types of vascular tissue. So you need to know that. It is actually a test question. The first type we'll talk about is called xylem. And xylem is the tissue that transports water plus any nutrients that are dissolved in that water. All of the water comes from the ground, goes up the roots, and it travels all the way up to the top of the plant. And it travels in there through little tubes called xylem. This is the xylem right here. We will look at this on a slide, and you'll notice that the xylem cells are bigger, and they have a thicker wall or stain around them because they are actually made of dead cells. So xylem makes up a series of tubes that just run from the roots all the way up to the top of the plant. And as we know from our radish lab, we dissolve nutrients in the soil. So that should help you remember that those nutrients that get dissolved in the water get transported through the xylem to all the parts of the plant. The other part of vascular tissue is called phloem. Phloem transports food. So the glucose that is made all the way up at the top of the plant in the leaves transfers all around the plant to these little cells or little tubes called phloem. The way I remember this, phloem starts with the sound F and it transports food. Xylem, WXY, water goes through xylem. So that's my trick to remember. So WXY is water and nutrients. Food, F, phloem sounds like an F. Here's another just cartoony picture of what xylem looks like. Xylem is actually made of dead cells, and they do become the rings of the tree. So as a plant grows, it's going to add girth to it. So it'll add a new row of cells out there, and that becomes the tree ring. If you are a maple syrup person, you know that we tap into just right inside the bark of a tree, and all that syrupy stuff drips out. That is the phloem, or the food source of that maple tree. So if you're a tree tapper, you'll know that the food, or the phloem, is always right here on the outside edge. The water goes through the middle. Okay, here's our favorite word again. We want to remain stable inside the plant. So we are talking about stability within a plant, so the plant's internal environment. And the vascular tissue is what keeps a plant stable. So how does that do that? The main reason is by following a concentration gradient, which I will explain. But if you take a paper towel and dip the tip of it into a tub of water, you'll notice the water starts moving up the towel. It's that same concept. Nature tends to an equilibrium. Nature wants to be balanced. Water wants to go where there is no water, which makes it actually move into places that need water. So there are three main ways that water gets all the way to the top of the plant from the roots. So it has to defy gravity. One way that it does this is called root pressure. So the roots down here are going to soak up water. They actually get really big, and then it kind of squeezes the water like you would squeeze a balloon, and it pushes it up into the stem. Once it gets into the stem, it can move by capillary action. And the most, important way that it gets all the way to the top is a process called transpiration pull. So you need to know that these three ways or processes are how water gets from all the way down here all the way to the top. So here's root pressure. Roots are covered in tiny little hairs, which helps them absorb lots of stuff that increases their surface area. So here's a little root that doesn't have any water in it. Once the water soaks into that root and it just moves through there by osmosis, the root gets tight. And because it gets tight, it's going to squeeze out that water like a balloon, and it will squeeze it right up to the stem of the plant. So root pressure fills the roots up with water. Pressure from that cell membrane of each of those root cells pushes the water up. All right, capillary action is actually pretty cool. If you take a really thick straw and dip it in water, and you look at the straw, you'll notice that the water goes up the sides of the straw a little bit. Well, if you have a narrow straw and you push it into the same level of water, the water will go higher up the straw. That's because water is charged, and the sides of the xylem are also slightly charged, so they are attracted to the charged water molecules. And because these charges attract, it actually pulls the water up the tube. And that works for a little while. Eventually, gravity gets too heavy and it won't let it go anymore. But capillary action, so capillary is a small tube. Because the xylem is super skinny, water can move up because of its charged nature. Here is the most important and best way to get water all the way to the top. It's called transpiration. I want you to consider comparing transpiration to human perspiration. We sweat, plants transpire. So when a plant is out in the sun, there will be some water that actually leaves the leaves. When the water gets pulled out of the leaves, that creates that concentration gradient, and then the water that's in the stems will naturally just go where it's dry, just like water moved into a dry paper towel. The water in the leaves leaves through little openings called stomata. So lots of information on here. The best way to get water up is because the leaves get dry, and when they get dry, water soaks up like a paper towel. And why do the leaves get dry? Because there are openings on the leaves called stomata, and water actually goes out of it, just like when you have your mouth hanging open, your mouth gets dry because the water leaves. Here's just a cross section of a leaf. We're going to look at this in a slide, but you can see this stomata, which is an opening on a leaf, and obviously how water could accidentally fall out of there if it's dry. This is also where plants breathe. So a stomata is similar to a mouth on a human. If you leave your mouth open, you can take air in and out, but your mouth will also get really dry because water will evaporate through your open mouth. And it looks like this. So it looks like a little mouth opening. They are always on the bottom of the leaf because they don't want to get dried out, and it's protected from the sun on the underside of the leaf. Remember that plants bring carbon dioxide in, oxygen out, and we don't want water to leave, but water will leave. The good part of water leaving is, again, it dries out the leaf and allows for that transpiration pull to happen. But the main job of a stomata is breathing. So, how does stomata work? They react to the light, and when they get hit with light, so during the daytime, the cells contract around the outside of the stomata, which will pull it open. So when this opens, because of the light making these cells out here contract, that allows carbon dioxide to go in. At night, when there's no light, these relax and that stomata will close. So think about the logic here. We need carbon dioxide to come in when there is sun energy available. We don't need carbon dioxide to come in when there's no sun. So the plants actually go to sleep at night. They close their mouth, they stop doing their job, and they don't worry about photosynthesis or gas exchange. And it also prevents water loss when we close those stomata. So the stomata are the biggest effector of plant internal balance because, like I said, when the stomata open, they let carbon dioxide in. That only happens when there's light outside, so photosynthesis can occur. When the stomata are open, the sad part is water will leave through that stomata. Just again, like when you have your mouth open, your mouth dries out. But the flip side to that is that dryness that happens because that mouth is open also allows that transpiration pull to work. So those dry leaves will actually pull water up from the roots to balance out that dryness. Again, stomata close at night. There's no need to be open because they can't do photosynthesis. And when they close, we don't lose water at night. So water is a nice safety net time. Okay, also, let's say there's a drought, weeks and weeks and weeks without rain. Even if it's light out, the stomata will close. When these plants notice that they don't have enough water in here, the stomata will actually relax and they will shut. And when they close down, no carbon dioxide comes in and no oxygen leaves. But the plant doesn't want to waste whatever precious water is still in its cells, so it shuts everything down. So the stomata close when we have a water shortage. It does that to prevent any extra water from leaving, but the downside is the plant will not grow because it can't do photosynthesis. Okay, that is it. Take some notes. You got a lab and a worksheet coming.